You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith.
Oxide bone and peace and good to you all. Welcome to the Aim Higher podcast. I'm Sister Catherine, and joining me today is His Excellency, Most Reverend Giles Butler, OFM. How are you, Your Excellency?
I'm doing very well, Sister. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. For our episode today, we are going to discuss the season of Advent, but in particularly the trying to get to the right mindset, the correct mentality, and maybe some encouragement, some practical ideas in which we can welcome Jesus into our homes while still having to maintain some social obligations in the world, but also, some family obligations or family traditions, more or less some encouragement and ways to navigate through this life. Because I think very often it's looked at very black and white at times. And then what happens is like, well, if I can't really be this rigid in my penance, then just throw those ideals out the window. And you had actually written back in the year 2019 for the December Seraph, actually this title, Welcoming Jesus into Our Homes. And great article. I will link how you can access this article on our website, because we do have issues of the Seraph going back at least 5+ years on our franciscanfathers.com. So I will link that. But one of the things that stood out to me is that we often underestimate the ability of children making sacrifices. And they probably are actually better at doing it than we are, because we are almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Everything kind of boils down to how our attitudes are. And if we have kind of a negative attitude towards having to do some sort of penance rather than getting to, that impacts the tone of the home, the tone of that the children pick up on. So when we look at is this a wonderful opportunity to do some sacrifice, your children will follow. But I thought it'd be better to get maybe more advice from you than me, because some people's like, oh, that's just Sister, what does she know? But to hear from someone who's studied these things better might be much more.
Okay, we're put in quite a dilemma here. It's either all or nothing. And that is a mindset. Either we are with Christ or we are against him. Either we are Catholic or we are not. And we want to draw that distinction, black and white. And truly in humanity, there is a lot of gray. And it's really difficult to lay down a rule or schedule for someone else. And these seasons of penance and abstinence, I love to encourage children to make those sacrifices. And as you mentioned, I believe children can make sacrifices and do penances much better than so many adults, because adults are tainted with human respect, if you will. We have to tell those little white lies to others, tell the little white lies to ourselves in order to exist in society. We can't upset our boss who has invited us to a Christmas party, this first week of Advent, and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a Catholic, I can't go. Yes, there are individuals who can do that, who are secure enough in their job or secure enough in their faith, and it's relatively easy. They can say, no, I'm not going to. But for many, that is not a possibility. I need this job and I don't want to upset the boss. I'm not secure enough in this job where I can make that statement, or I can't upset the in-laws because that's only going to make matters worse. Whoever it may be, because we're adults, we have to cater to human respect, if you will. Whereas children, not so much. If grandma is slighted, grandma will get over it. Mm-hmm. And parents will say, you go tell your grandmother you're sorry, and explain things in a way that is understandable. But back to the question at hand. How do we navigate this season of Advent? I assume this is what we're talking about rather than Lent,
Have I seen this
because
before?
no, but penitential
Penitential
seasons
season, yeah.
are all incorporated. It's the same idea. During this season of Advent, the world is celebrating Christmas.
It's starting.
And the Christmas songs are playing in the stores. The decorations are going up. People are putting up Christmas trees. There's the shopping and the wrapping of presents. And I don't know if anybody's baking yet or not, but I don't know if anybody bakes. Do they still bake?
Oh,
Or do they just go to the store and buy the
not at these prices that I've seen in the store. And there, a lot of people find joy in the baking. For a lot of people, it's a deep rooted tradition in their families, of specialty cookies, so or breads or what have you. So and like I said, the prices to buy something in that capacity, which wouldn't be nearly as good, is definitely, I think, a deal breaker for a lot of people.
Okay, so we are in a penitential season. It is a time of preparation. And this time of preparation doesn't mean that we exclude the thought of Christmas from our hearts. This time of preparation is a time to think even more so of Christ's coming. It's an anticipatory emotion or feeling that we need to develop, or at least I think is we need for our spiritual development. We need this anticipatory desire. And to incorporate that into our children during the season of Advent, it's not just put on sackcloth and ashes and not enjoy life. Even in the midst of our penances, we should be singing. We should have joy in our hearts. And the joy and the penance are not exclusive of one another. They can be incorporated. And actually, to celebrate Christmas properly, we need this spiritual preparation, but we also need a physical preparation. We cannot wait until the day before, many times, to decorate our homes for Christmas and get everything prepared. Our work schedules or whatever schedules may be are obstacles to this. And so what we need to do is step back and realize, yes, I'm going to have to take a day or two of Advent, maybe a week of Advent, and set aside in preparation. We need a time to do this baking if we're going to have the baked goods ready for Christmas. We need time to clean if the house is going to be clean to welcome Jesus on Christmas morning. We need time to decorate the tree and set out the nativity set. We cannot do all of this. Well, we could do all this on Christmas morning, but then we would be so overwhelmed with the material aspects, we're missing the entire spirit of Christmas. And so I'm here to tell parents and others that, yes, it's okay to set up your tree maybe a week before Christmas or whenever it is that you can fit it into your schedule so that on Christmas morning you can truly wake up relaxed. I'm not pressured. Everything is taken care of. And now I can truly dedicate my thoughts, my desires towards the spiritual aspect of this entire season.
And we had that growing up. My father worked for the post office, so he was working a lot of overtime. So it usually was a tradition. The Sunday before Christmas is when we put up the tree, and sometimes that would be right with Christmas the next couple days or a week before, but we weren't allowed to light the tree until Christmas. And so I think if you kind of maybe put that into the plan that we'll put it up, but we're not going to light it. It does add, sure. I mean, I don't like a dark tree myself, so that's definitely my motivation for not putting up a tree too early. But to add more to that solemnness of that weight, and then you have kind of your own tree lighting ceremony on Christmas Eve, and it'll make it much more special. I think what happens for us, a lot of adults, is that we miss not being in the know of things. Children, they want to know, they can't wait to be adult to do whatever they want. And of course, we adults know that that's not how it works. We would love to not have to figure everything out, make things happen. And so there's an imbalance there, but you both you could make this meet more in the middle by adding something like that into your home. To say, all right, well, we are going to put up the tree, but we're going to wait till 6 o'clock Christmas Eve to light it, and we'll all get together. Maybe then we'll play some Christmas music. Make that special. And even though out in the world, their peers and schools, whatever, they're already decorated, they've seen all these things. There's still something to wait for at home. Because I think we're all more or less victims of too much. There's just too much going on, and we almost feel that, well, I feel miserable because there's a lot thrown at me that I might as well just succumb. Or you can actually have some say in this by controlling what goes on in your own home. And it is that simple. So
Well, you mentioned baking. To make cookies with the children is very entertaining, educational, and it can be spiritual. You could put on some Advent hymns that are not depressing, but uplifting, anticipatory, as I keep saying, because we are looking forward to Christmas. But you want a real penance for children? Let's bake cookies and not eat any until Christmas.
which I think is kind of
Or if the children it's too much penance for children, you could say, we'll have one cookie now, but the rest of these we have to put away.
Certainly. And I think that's probably how it works. For us growing up, we didn't bake together as a family. My mom did a lot of that when we were off at school, but I think she did do some baking with her cousins. So that wasn't a tradition in our family, but I know it is some for a lot of families. And I had brought the question up to you because you brought up Advent music, and even some Advent hymns are kind of limited. And my thought was, would it be acceptable that you put together a certain playlist that might contain Christmas hymns, but there are still some Christmas hymns that are about anticipation, or basically, if you're going to make a playlist of Christmas music, make it definitely Christ-centered. Like that would be a good, I don't want to say compromise, and I definitely don't want people to think I'm trying to find loopholes. I mean, I love Christmas music. Anyone that knows me knows I love Christmas music. I can't wait for the time when I can properly listen to Christmas music. And so I'm not trying to find a loophole, but I'm trying to help families navigate, like, okay, we really want to do more for our, to grow in love for God. What can we do to make that happen? So instead of, listening to secular music, which really have nothing to do with Christmas, to then maybe pick songs that are more fitting and that will draw your mind to the manger scene. And that way you can talk about it, have children select a song that fits in that criteria. A lot of children, they like to be involved, and giving them a chance to say, okay, I really like this Christmas hymn, so let's add that to this special baking playlist that we decide is appropriate for this time of year. And then you can also have, as children are getting older and can read from the book of Gospel of St. Luke that talks about the birth of our Lord. Generate discussion, try to make this preparation, whether it's the baking or decorating, draw it to something more spiritual. It's definitely doable. And I rather direct families to think this of a possibility, say, well, instead of like, well, this is just what we've always done and that's how we're going to do it, that there is a way to improve even the oldest of traditions.
We mentioned baking, but there's a lot of other things that need to be done in preparation for Christmas. I mentioned cleaning the house. And it's one thing to send your child to the room and say, go clean your room. And that is a penance. It's penitential. Do it for the love of God, or do it because I told you so, or whatever it may be. But if we can have Christmas music playing in the background and we can work together, if a couple of people in the family come together and help you clean your room, and we can sing hymns, we can listen to hymns, and we can make this a joyful occasion. And maybe after your room's clean, you can help me clean my room, or we can clean the kitchen, or we can clean the living room, but we are all involved. And cleaning the house is not so burdensome when there are many hands. Even if the hands are making more of a mess, then we could do it better and faster ourselves. Getting the children involved, getting them in the spirit, cleaning the house can be fun. Taking care of things can be fun. Preparing the house can be fun. And we mentioned decorating the tree. Let the children decorate the tree. Yes, they're not going to get the tinsel in exactly the right place, and you could do it better yourself, but back off and let them experience the joy of doing this. I mentioned setting up a nativity scene. Set up the nativity scene whenever you like. Just keep baby Jesus out of the crib. Baby Jesus doesn't come until Christmas. Everything is set up and everything is ready, but that empty manger or that empty place in our diorama, our nativity set that we've set up for our home feels a little bit empty because baby Jesus is not there. And anticipating the time when a certain child can put baby Jesus in there. And if you've got many children, they may have to take turns, and everybody gets a turn.
Absolutely.
There are many things that you can work out, but it doesn't have to be all negative. And I think really that is what Sister is looking for in this podcast is that Advent, this time of preparation, doesn't have to be devoid of any joy or celebratory spirit. We can still have this celebratory spirit and a penitential spirit simultaneously. We can have fun doing our penances. We can put a smile on our face as we make sacrifices. And, to get that look from mom and say, well, I'll put the cookie back because I really shouldn't have it until Christmas. It can be done joyfully, and it doesn't have to be filled with tears or yelling or screaming. Let's make a little sacrifice for Jesus. And as you mentioned, the children are very good at this. If they're directed properly or prompted, and of course, it may not work out well for everyone all the time, but try something else.
Try something new each year, and maybe also consider, taking something out that you normally do, and maybe replace it with something a little bit more spiritual. And sit with your children and get their input. I think when you're very forthcoming about it, it's like, okay, we like to go every year to go see a tree lighting that generally I think happens probably about this time of year. Right now, this is right before Thanksgiving. This podcast is going to come out right before Advent starts. Those things are already happening, and I get it's fun to go do these things, but maybe say, all right, let's skip that this year and let's try to find something that's a little bit more fitting to the spirit of anticipating and waiting for Jesus's birthday. His, what we honor his birthday to be. I don't want anyone coming at me that is not, we don't know for sure that December 25th is his birthday. We never claimed it, but that's the day in which the church honors his birth. Anyway, but how, as I said before, children like to have some input. So let them see what they'd be willing to sacrifice. You might be quite surprised. And maybe for surprising way that you're going to have to tone that down. It's like, well, maybe that's not a good option. That's too severe. But we have to help children think things out so that they can plan and work these things out as adults. And we might, as adults, become better because we're also getting input from children that they might see it much more simply than we ever could. Because let's face it, everything feels very complicated, mostly due to the commercialization of what Christmas is, but and all the expectations. But just really trying to turn it around and relax a little bit. I think what all of us really want is to relax more, and sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, if all these expectations, are they really things that you have to do? Like, try to find something like, do we have to do this, or do I have to shoulder this a lot myself? Because a lot of times, a lot of us will take on too much burden, and I see a lot, and this is probably true in a lot of families. A lot of the memorable things is a result of the sacrifices that the parents and primarily the mothers make. Because a lot of times, men aren't that interested in some of these details. Some of them are, just as, there are some men that don't clean, apparently, and there are men that are very active in cleaning their homes and being involved in their children. So that's again why when we treat this as a black and white scenario, you're going to fail, because none of us are that obvious, I guess, or that clear. So,
Well, you mentioned getting the input of children, especially from year to year. The children are going to remember certain things. And it's worthwhile during the season of Advent. What would you like to do for Advent? What would you like to do for Christmas? And get their input of what they like. Perhaps you can also get their input of what they didn't like. Mom, you made us do this last year, and I really didn't like that. And if we could skip that this year, it would really be helpful. That's good information.
I'm sure you would have loved that as a child.
Let me have some input and say, well, this is non-negotiable. We have to do this. And I'm sorry that you don't enjoy this as well as others, but this is an opportunity for you to do penance.
Yes.
Or perhaps you can say, okay, we don't have to do that. That's not mandatory. What else would you like to do instead? Where else would you like to go? What can we do? And perhaps it might be, I just want to sit home and read a book. We can find a nice Christmas book, rather than go out or do this or visit these people or that people, or, maybe we can have them come to our house rather than going to their house. I guess possibilities are limitless.
Well, what I appreciate about the mindset that is shifting in these times is that recognizing not everybody is extroverted, and not everybody likes to go out and do all these things. And sometimes I think or at least it used to be unfathomable to someone that loves to do all the things, that there are people out there that just like, no, I like a quiet night at home, build a fire, have some hot chocolate, and read a book. That would be a great winter activity for me. So there's always, those who like to do all this stuff pushing the people that don't, and then sometimes the more introverted person is pushy on the extroverted person. But I also see like that's also the prime example of the either side, and coming to the middle and working things out together. Communication is so important. And I think more and more people are trying to work on feeling, I feel like this might seem cliche, but safe to vocalize something that they're uncomfortable with. And I think that encouraging children to have the opportunity to say what they like, of course, but also what they don't like, so that because you want them to be an adult that will not put themselves in a position they don't want to be just because they're afraid of offending somebody else. And the only way to learn that is to teach them at home or within family. And like I said before, you might get some pretty good ideas from your children on what to do. And maybe you also might get some insight on how, I don't want to say children are greedy or selfish, in a sense that I think we all can be to a degree. But when you see your child like having that wish list for Christmas, that's really more of a result of this world and the excess of stuff. Okay, so I remember when we were younger, you got the Sears catalog and the JCPenney Christmas catalog, and you thumbed through and you marked stuff you wanted for Christmas. Very rarely did we ever get anything out of that book, and we didn't care come Christmas Day. And because probably on the one hand we'd like to be surprised, but also I think we also learned pretty early on our parents didn't have a lot of money. And there were some children that they didn't get toys for Christmas. They got underwear and socks. And I also like the idea of a family friend. When he was growing up, they only got 3 presents each for Christmas. And their mother said, because Jesus got 3 presents. And the question is, do you think you're better than Jesus?
But Jesus got gold.
It's true. So trying to simplify that. And I know that it's easy to get carried away in these things. I mean, I remember my nephew's first Christmas. I definitely went overboard. And you realize soon enough, like, he doesn't remember it. He doesn't need it. He's fine with one thing. And ultimately, your time is what's most valuable, most precious. And it may not always see the reward of that right away, but I can look back on many things from my childhood that it was really the time and effort that people gave me or a situation, family, that meant the most. I can barely remember any of the gifts I got at Christmas if there weren't a few pictures showing it. And that's the other thing. We didn't take a lot of pictures either.
I remember hearing from my mother that if you give children a present, they will take the present out and play with the box. The empty box means more than the
yes,
present.
and I would add that some toddlers, you better make sure it's a big box. There's a story about Father Anthony when he was little about that, but he was a toddler. He just saw that, oh, all I get is this little box. That's a crappy present. So all we had to do was get him a big old box, and he would have been fine. And I get that's mortifying moments for parents, but children don't know the consequences of what they're saying, and that's when you guide them through it. But again, would we be so worked up of reactions of people if we would just relax more? And we were talking before we started this podcast, going back to the anticipation and the wait. While it was probably undoubtedly stressful of a travel for Mary and Joseph to go to Bethlehem when Mary was especially so close to giving birth to her child, I can't help but imagine that there was a lot of happiness on that journey. And you brought up who's to say Mary wasn't singing praises to God through all of that. That her and Joseph weren't talking about all other beautiful things that will happen as a result of this birth, and what's to come, because she did know who her son was going to be. And
she knew who he is.
Yes. I meant who he was going to be and what he was going to ultimately do, because there is even, I think was a revelation of St. Margaret of Cortona, that while the birth was such a joyous event, there was still an element of sadness, and I'm paraphrasing here, because even as an infant, obviously with God, our Lord being God, knew the terrible death he was going to face years later. But he wanted to do that for us, which is why it's good to kind of have that in your mind during this season, but also remember how much he wanted to do that for us, and that the best gifts we can give Jesus is to actually get there and be with him in heaven. And doing these little things, being faithful in those little things, do matter. And I often feel that because we're in a world of instant gratification for a lot of things, that we don't keep up with the important things, because such as our spiritual life, prayer, meditation, or even things for our better health. We don't always want to eat healthy or exercise because it takes a long, consistent discipline to actually see something happen. You might feel it sooner than you feel it, but because we're not seeing it, we want to give up. And I would hope maybe at this point for a lot of us, we're starting to wake up to that mentality. It's like, we know we're not going to see a lot of these things. They're not meant for us to see, but we still should keep doing them anyway, because we know how it actually feels. And we know how it feels to go back and jump into a lot of junk food when you have been, eating more healthily. We know how crappy that feels. And that's kind of how when, you're avoiding sin, especially because you want to get to heaven, you want to be with God. And then when you fall into a sin, how you really feel rotten about it and want to quickly as possible go to confession and avoid that sin altogether, and sin in general, obviously. But any other comments to that? my little talk there.
I do think it's important that we recognize children have free wills, though you can physically force them and manipulate them physically in their bodies and their location in space, because you're bigger, you're stronger, you've been given that authority, you have that power. We must also recognize that God has given them a free will. And we need, I think, to respect that free will. Doesn't mean we let the children do whatever they want. That's why God made parents and those in authority. But it's okay for children to become upset. And we should not become upset because the child has become upset. We are supposed to be a little bit more stable than the child and say, okay, you're upset. Let's examine this. Let's go through this. Why are you upset? What can we do to fix it? And sometimes they're upset and there is nothing that can be done about it other than to perhaps help them recognize that pouting, yelling, screaming, slamming doors, whatever it is not going to change the situation. It's not going to make it any better. It's not going to make them feel better. But if perhaps we can redirect our thoughts towards, Mary and Joseph knocking on doors and being rejected, and there's no room here. We have no place for you. Go somewhere else, and then being rejected, so that their only hope now is a stable where the animals are kept. We can show them Mary, Joseph, and even Jesus himself have endured these things, but did so without losing it, without falling apart. And we can pray to Jesus to give us that strength. We can ask the Blessed Mother to help us, Saint Joseph to help us. And these are educational moments. Our children should not be afraid to tell us their discontent or their sorrows or whatever it may be. But for them to gain that confidence and that trust in us, they have to know, or at least have a relative understanding that they're not going to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be yelled at. They're not going to be berated and told how stupid they are. But it is really a learning moment because everybody has those moments. And as Sister mentioned so many times before, adults are throw temper tantrums too,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to be called out on those, just like the children. It's not okay for parents to do things that the children are not allowed to do. It's not okay for parents to use our Lord's name in vain, to swear and to throw objects and to yell and scream. It's not okay for children. It's not okay for adults. And we need to help our children work through this. So, okay, you're angry, you feel like throwing things. Here's how we can deal with this. And I know perhaps I've fallen into that too, and you've probably seen me do that before, but it's not okay. Maybe I can help you and you can help me. But to recognize this free will, to even fan that free will to love God. And there's a lot of cliches that I grew up hearing. You're thirsty. The people in hell are thirsty too, or this really hurts. Well, does it hurt as much as Jesus hanging on the cross? And even as an adult, when I was teaching school and children would hurt themselves or something at recess and bawling their eyes out, and I would take a crucifix and hold it in front of them. Look at Jesus. Think of how much it hurt. It hurt him. Does your pain hurt as much as Jesus? And the tears would dry up. They would sniffle back and say, no, I'm okay. Now, I've been told that's really cruel. But on the other hand, it's exactly the tool that works well for me. When I'm feeling down and out, it's the crucifix. I encourage families. You have a home, you're starting a family, have a crucifix in every room. There should be images there to show you what Christ has done for you, to show you the love that God has for you. This is a constant reminder. And of course, as I've mentioned, so many of these cliches, people in hell want ice water. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you want. Suck it up, sacrifice, walk it off. All of these things need not to just be said, but to be understood. Help the child understand.
Well, and then there's a time and a place, because obviously when you would bring the crucifix down to a crying child, you knew that this was not like an injury cry necessary, or a severe injury that requires medical attention. Like, we're not advocating that. It's like, oh, well, walk off your broken leg. Obviously, no. You have to use your judgment, but there are times when that they're just tears that are what's what I'm looking for, just
embarrassment, attachment,
right? And most of the time you just need a moment to get it out, have someone understand, and know that they still love you even in a moment when you feel very unlovable. Just to know that sometimes you have to feel the feelings. It's not good to just bury everything. And I know that was a common practice, but I can go on a whole tangent on, people taking spare the rod, spoil the child way out of context, but we're not going to go there today. But so while some of these cliches are very helpful, they're not the only thing. You're not going to get very far if every answer is a cliche, which should be pretty obvious. But but also put yourself in the shoes of the child. Of you probably think of a moment where you felt really unheard and even ridiculed for feeling a certain way. And very often people just want to be listened to, don't necessarily need advice. Just let them get it out. They can usually resolve it themselves. And if they need advice or advice is warranted, work it out together. But that's why communication is so important with
Children are people too.
they are.
They are made in the image and likeness of God. They are rational creatures, even though they don't act rationally all
Sure.
the time, but neither do grown-ups. I've seen a lot of grown-ups who act very irrationally, but we need to help these children develop this rationality, this ability to see problems, foresee problems, adapt to situations in a calm, collective manner, to be able to approach the cross. Yes, there's going to be sorrow, there's going to be tears, there's going to be pain, it's going to hurt. There's this cross in front of me, but Jesus took up his cross for me. I'm going to take up my cross for him. And to really to be able to control the emotions without allowing the emotions to control the person. The person, the reason, the intelligence control the emotion. And that's what we need to help children do. And we can't do it if we shut them down, punish them for it. Let them come out. Okay. Spill your guts. Okay. You're falling apart. Okay. You had a good cry. Now let's think about this. Let's look at it. This is not unusual. This is not something new. I myself have gone through this, or there are many people in the world who go through exactly the same thing. Here's how we can deal with this. There are even saints in heaven who have dealt with this, and here is how they dealt with it. Maybe I don't know exactly how they dealt with it, but we can pray to them. We can pray to God. We can pray to the patron of whoever this is, your patron, who you were named after, and we can seek help. And we can do this, and I hate to use the term mature, but in a mature manner. And I prefer perhaps an intellectual or rational manner rather than irrationally. We can deal with this in a rational manner. And I say I hate to use mature or adult or grown up because, as you mentioned, so many adults and grown-ups act very irrationally, very immature.
Well, and thankfully, a lot of us, I think in my generation, are opening our eyes to that concept instead of, and breaking the cycle. And we can look at some decisions or behaviors of our own parents and kind of like, well, what were they thinking? But then as you maybe think about it more, you can see that it has a lot to do with what they were exposed to, ideals that their parents had. And some of them very good, but we know that there are some ideals that were not so good. And we need to change that. And I'm happy to see that there is more of thinking this through and not, especially when we talk about with like our catechism, like encouraging the children to talk about it, to think it through, have discussions. That's going to make a confident Catholic, just as having, other things you deal with in the world, having discussions, talking about it. Discussions and talking about it. How about that? The same thing. That's going to make a confident adult. And you have, and I think in turn, as we're working with our children that way, we're also healing from maybe not being able to vocalize, because there was a mentality that children should,
should be seen and not heard.
And for some people, it was not seen nor heard.
I don't even want to see you. Go to your room.
Right. And that was a very damaging mentality. And I think we had a little bit of that, but we were around a lot of adults growing up because on my mom's side, all of our cousins were older, and my dad's side, we had 2 cousins we would see fairly regularly. But most of the time, we were around a lot of adults. And you listen to their conversations, you learn a lot, and soon there was a shift where you were brought into the conversation, being able to add something. I think my only regret is maybe not sitting down and asking some adults a little bit more about their childhood. So we have that kind of knowledge now that we want to navigate more relationships with other people. And then how else are you going to learn how to deal with people with conflicting opinions if you're not exposed to them. And I know very often people are, it's like, well, if you don't agree with me with 100%, we can't be friends. We can't, you're not my relative. That's a very narrow-minded ideal. And for some people, they do just fine if they do have varying opinions, that they just don't talk about those subjects. And I think that sometimes that gets murky for Catholics, like, but we need to spread the gospels. But ultimately, the best way to show people the best way to love God is to by your actions, not necessarily by what you say. You show a lot more by what you do. I mean, you make a difference more by what you do. I mean, because you could say all the wonderful things, but if your actions say differently, what's going to have more impact? So, because as I said before, we're all about what we can see. Maybe not all about what we can see, but we rely on seeing results. And good decisions are a result of good conscience, wanting to keep God's commandments, wanting to live for God. And if we actively strive to do that, that's going to be seen by other people. We may not notice it in ourselves, which is probably much to our advantage, but you never know what your commitment to Christ is going to bring to someone that you may never even expected.
And back to the season of Advent. Basically, I want to say we need to be moderate, avoid the extremes. I want to, I guess, I don't know, rebuke maybe those who want to celebrate Christmas and it is a season of joy and there is no penance in their life during the season of Advent. That is a wrong extreme. And again, I don't want to impress everybody that they must not have any joy in the season of Advent, because Advent is a joyous, even though penitential season. So we have to blend those together, and we need to incorporate this not just for ourselves, but for those around us, for our family, and especially for those who have children. We need to incorporate the season of penance, but yet not make penance so burdensome, so onerous that it is repulsive to the children. I want the season of penance and penitential acts to be something challenging, yes, exciting, yes, but not something that is going to turn them off. I want to do penance, and it can be fun when we do it together. We're making cookies, but we can't eat any until Christmas Day. Even it's season of Advent, we're listening to Christmas music, but we're not going to sing Jingle Bells yet.
Right.
We're going to sing perhaps Away in a Manger. And we're singing this so we know the song for Christmas. We're doing preparation for Christmas. We're practicing our Christmas play. We're practicing our Christmas hymns. And there is joy in this, but this is all in a sense of preparation, getting ready so that when Christmas comes, we are ready and we can send forth our best and give our complete hearts, minds, and souls to God, and not worry that I'm singing off key or everybody else is singing off key and they can't match me because I'm the only one who is on key. But really, we need to be moderate and open up the world for our children to be moderate. Open up the world for them to be able to, or open up their eyes and their souls so that they can deal with the world, where they can see, oh yes, all my friends are going to this party, they're opening presents, and it's the Advent, and you won't let us open any presents, and this really stinks, and I don't like you, I hate you. And, let them get it all out. There's no reason for you to retaliate. Okay, and once things have calmed down, then you can have a rational conversation on the child's level, but still logical. Okay, yes, your friends are all at this party. They're all getting presents. They're all opening presents, and you feel left out. I get it. It hurts. But we need to make a sacrifice for Jesus. This is the season of Advent. And, whatever words come to you, let the Holy Ghost guide you. Ask for guidance from the Holy Ghost. You may not get it right. The children may still be mad at you, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're patient, things will turn around. They will see that you love God and you love them, and things will work out in the end. And as you mentioned, your memories, the child's memories, are going to be of who was there in my darkest moment, who was there in my times of greatest joy, who was there. Being there is more important than what is said, what is done. They're going to remember the who, the where, the what, maybe not so much. They'll remember the occasion when they built a fort out of all the empty boxes that they had left over after they opened their Christmas presents. They'll remember that occasion, but they probably won't remember the presents that were in the boxes.
That's so true because, I mean, well, granted, by extension, I remember the actual gift, but one year our grandparents had gotten us beanbags, and we didn't get to keep them very long because one of my brothers decided to open up his and explore the insides. And so my parents' solution was that, well, we're throwing out everybody's beanbag. It's like, okay, fine. But
They came in nice big boxes.
well, the thing was, because there were 6 of us, my grandpa arranged the boxes into the shape of a tree. So when we walked into their family room, we could see it. It was pretty exciting. But ultimately, it's still the memory and seeing like the efforts of my grandparents. Like years down the road, I can, I don't think I stayed mad at our brother very long. But I honestly, I think we all got over it pretty quick. But I do still remember just the events, going to grandpa's house. It was the doing those things that stick out. Like you said, who was there. And I know parents, grandparents, families, they put a lot of effort for a memorable Christmas for their children. And sometimes to the destruction of their own sanity. And I think we have to remember that you don't, because one of the damaging things about social media that I know a lot of my peers can relate to is that we see, there's the reality and then what Instagram shows you. And we all know that what we see on social media is not the reality. And yet we still get sucked into like, well, if I just had this one item, I would feel really happy. So we get sucked into that a lot. But ultimately, no, just the simplest traditions. I mean, one of that I have, and I think my brothers would share it, is that we randomly went out. My dad was working, so my mom took us out. And this is back when driving was a family activity. You drive somewhere. We would look at Christmas lights, and my mom stopped at a gas station and picked up this Christmas cassette that was very northern Wisconsin vibe to it. Fellow Wisconsinites will probably know what I mean. But it was a hilarious cassette tape, and we would drive around and we were laughing. And that was probably one of the most inexpensive excursions, but one more memorable. So, and I think we all know that we don't have to put a lot of money into things, and yet we still get sucked into it. So, just, I guess, keep that in mind, that
Moderation.
The
simple things are the most pleasant. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of joy. Oh,
shall we
I think
say
that
amen here?
I think that would be great.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et manet semper. Amen.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
You're very welcome.
And Deo gratias.
Deo gratias.